Today, I'd like to continue our discussion about finding joy and looking at it from both the Christian perspective and the Buddhist perspective. If you look at it from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, uh, one of their teachings is about suffering. And obviously, some would say the opposite of joy in life is when we have to deal with suffering. But what causes suffering? And Buddhism, of course, is famous for reflecting on that question, because that was really the fundamental experience of the Buddha when he saw suffering. He was, how does this fit into the world? He came from a very privileged environment, encountered suffering, and was very upset by it. So, what causes suffering in life? According to the Tibetan Buddhists, suffering is a general pattern of how we relate to other people. So what causes suffering is how we encounter other people, and how we get to know other people, and how we get to experience other people. And so the expression that the Tibetan Buddhists use is envy toward those who are above us, competitiveness towards those who are our equal, and contempt towards those who are our lower. Now, when you analyze those three emotions, envy, competitiveness, and contempt, you're going to see a lot of suffering involved with that, right? Because if one is envious towards those who are above us, we're always going to be striving to be better than them. And when we're not, when we fall short, there's going to be suffering involved. And of course, the effort that envy causes in us to strive for things maybe that we shouldn't be striving for even. Uh, that certainly would be upsetting to us. And not that a certain amount of desire to better ourselves, certainly that can be a good thing, right? To improve ourselves. That's one of the foundational principles, I would think, of both Buddhism and Christianity, that we want to reform those things about ourselves that need reforming, but certainly not in a sense of being envious of those who are above us, maybe have more intellect than we have, maybe more artistic ability, maybe better basketball players or baseball players, maybe those who are wealthier than us, right? That we can have all these envies and they can work on us and cause suffering in us. And then the second aspect, competitiveness towards the equal. Well, to compete is a good thing. We are certainly in many situations where we do have to compete and try our best. But there's a certain competitiveness that can be very destructive, where it's just about winning. And when we lose, we feel badly. We suffer. So that sense of competing uh, should be just, giving it our best, giving it our all, and not so much in terms of the outcome as the effort that we put into it. Because a lot of times deliberating over the outcome or thinking about the outcome too much, if only I had done that, if I had trained harder, if I had taken more lessons, and so, all of these things can play in our mind and cause, of course, suffering in that overly competitive spirit. Some competition, of course, is very healthy and good for us. And then, of course, contempt towards the lower. So somebody who is less in terms of what they have materially than we have, or less in terms of a particular talent, to feel contempt for them. I mean, it's a terrible thing, right? Instead of just experiencing them and getting to know them as a person and not really caring about lower or higher or equal, but just loving them and getting to know them and getting to know the richness that is in their life and the gifts that they have and the experiences that they have relating to them as a person. So suffering can be caused in those three aspects. Somebody who is above being envious, somebody who is equal competing, somebody who is lower having contempt. A famous example of this is the monkey experiment. Monkeys were fed grapes, and they just enjoyed those grapes, and it was wonderful, and they got to like the sweetness of the grape. And then they were quickly changed from the grape to the cucumber. And they tasted the cucumber, and because they were expecting the grape, they threw the cucumber back, and they became very angry. Why don't I have the grape? I have the cucumber. The cucumber doesn't taste as good. I don't like it as much. Um, so that sense of suffering that can be caused when we have a certain expectation. And the whole idea of inequality then pulls into it. If I'm not on the same level as another person, but I don't have the same as they have. Maybe this other monkey has a grape and I'm just getting the cucumber, and we're upset at that. But instead, thanking God, thanking the Almighty, thanking our Lord for the cucumber, and delighting in that. So again, the whole idea of suffering, what causes our suffering. The Tibetan word for envy is an interesting word. It's trakdak. And trakdak, when you look at it in terms of envy, and you translate it, it literally means heavy or constricted shoulders. So it's when our shoulders become very heavy, very constricted, very tight. We have this envy within us, where we have this desire for other things. Buddhism compares envy to a venomous snake that poisons us. So it's a snake that can come in and can cause all sorts of damage to us, right? That envy, when it gets in our system, can be very, very destructive. Just like that snake, you don't think it's going to really hurt us that much, and that venom gets in us and causes all sorts of destruction of our body. So that sense of the shoulders becoming constricted. The Judeo-Christian tradition, of course, has a slightly different word for that. We call it coveting. Do not covet thy neighbor's wife. Do not covet thy neighbor's goods. This idea of coveting. It's interesting that Jesus in the scriptures would say, my burden is easy. My burden is light. Come to me, all you are burdened. I will take upon my shoulders your burdens. So the Lord doesn't want us to feel those burdens, doesn't want us to feel that envy, doesn't want us to have those constricted shoulders. He wants us to be free. He wants us to accept the goodness that is there in life, and not to be envious of what somebody else has, but to be filled with gratitude for what we have been given. And so when we take that attitude of just thankfulness, that suffering can be really eliminated in our lives. We don't have that suffering that is caused by envy, by competitiveness, by